Character is deciding what it is you want and then waking up every day and making progress towards that goal. I forget who said this, we don't have habits. Our habits have us.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Each week, I'll talk with creative leaders who face the same fears and obstacles we all face. What makes these folks effective are the processes they've developed that allow them to push through the darkness to consistently ship their work and make a difference. If you've ever felt that your fears and insecurities are getting the best of you, know that you're not alone. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. Come join our community at thecreatorsjourney.com for ideas and inspiration that will bring light and direction to your journey.
Here's the key to my front door. Got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
My guest today is Mark Barden. As a partner in the consulting firm eatbigfish and the co-author of the book A Beautiful Constraint, Mark is highly sought after as a speaker and facilitator, skilled at helping companies discover breakthrough solutions. Some of the highlights of his colorful career include a Platinum Award for his direct response marketing, taking a .com public, starting his own ad agency to launch Yahoo, selling Guinness door-to-door, working as a carney at state fairs throughout the Midwest, playing the part of a Buddhist monk in a Kleenex commercial, and warming up a crowd for Ellen DeGeneres. Mark and his wife and their two daughters live in Marin County, California. Welcome, Mark.
Hello, Charles. How are you today?
Quite delighted to have this conversation with you. I have so thoroughly enjoyed reading your book, A Beautiful Constraint. It sets a standard for what great book experience should be. And I want to say, as a lover of books, that the heft of this book speaks to the weight of the writing and ideas that you and your co-author, Adam Morgan, put in it. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Charles. And I do want to give a shout out to Helen Redstone at our office in London, Eat Big Fish, because we ended up designing this book ourselves. It was really important for us to create a beautiful book with the title of Beautiful Constraint, and to embrace the constraints that we had ourselves, which was not a lot of money to design something. And we just said, you know what, we can do this. And Helen's a very talented designer, as you can tell. So in a sense, we were walking our talk by designing the book ourselves. And I'm so glad that it resonated with you.
Well, it's something to be proud of. I want to jump into constraints, but I want to step back to some of your early career and hear just a little bit about your jobs working as a carney and peddling Guinness, and maybe some of the life lessons you learned from those experiences and maybe the impact they've had on where you've come.
Yeah, well, the carney thing's an interesting. So I was, as a kid growing up in the UK, obsessed with American cop shows, Starsky and Hutch, Ironside, Banachek. That's a bit of a rare one. But I got to know a lot about America through the TV, and I really wanted to go. So when I was a student at the University of Birmingham in the UK, there's a British Universities North America Club, and there was a program where you could go to the States, and as far as I could tell, teach wealthy Upper West Side kids to play tennis at some summer camp. And I'm like, I am not doing that. But I want to go to the States. Are there any other jobs? And somebody said, look in the Yellow Pages. We had a US Yellow Pages there, and see what you can find. And there was a carnival, Ray Kamak shows based in Florida, that would tour the Midwest and play all the state fairs there. And I just immediately thought, that's for me. I want to see that part of America. And it was, in a sense, it was a beautiful constraint because I didn't have the money that I needed to fund, just a tour across the state. So I knew I had to work my way around. And so I wanted a job that involved traveling. So I hooked up with them. It was the scariest, most outrageous experience I've ever had because carnivals are staffed entirely, at the time at least, with runaways, Vietnam vets, and ex-cons. So I got to meet some really colorful people, and I played, Boise State Fair. I played Bismarck, North Dakota, and I just saw what America was really like, and fell in love with the place. And I didn't know at that time, obviously, that I would one day end up living here. And I've lived here in the States now for 21 years, a lot of it on the West Coast. And yeah, that was my introduction to America, if you like, was through the state fairs and the life and times of carnies.
What a gutsy way to come to this country and see the heart of America. I had a chance when I was in college to go to Iran and visit there. That was before the Shah fell. And I was so focused on having money for school and was kind of scared of and didn't have support of my family to necessarily leave this country and just go somewhere. And it was one of the regrets of my life that I wasn't bold enough then to just say, screw it, I'm going to go somewhere. And looking back, never to have had the opportunity to go somewhere like that again. So I always, not that America was the same way, but I always think when somebody takes that chance and goes somewhere and gets into the heart of a culture, my hat's off to them. So hat tip to you.
Yeah, it was remarkable, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book. So Adam Morgan, who's my co-author of this book, he and I have known each other for a long, long time, 25 years, I think, and started the business together in the US 15, 16 years ago. And when we were sitting down a few years back now, having done 10 years work at Eat Big Fish, I was like, I'm ready for another adventure, Adam. That idea of going and traveling on the carnival was, it's emblematic of things I'll do periodically. I'll just take off and go do stuff, which is why that resume that you read through at the beginning here is so odd. I think none of it really makes sense, doesn't hang together as a whole. But the common theme there is adventure. And so I said to him, I think writing a book with you is the next adventure. I want that experience of knowing what it's like to stare at the blank page and get some of these ideas that we've been percolating and brewing for years down onto a piece of paper in a way that's coherent and interesting and engaging, and I want that experience. So that's, if there is a common thread, it's adventure, I suppose, in my own small A adventure way.
Yeah, I think we often don't see the dots connected until we get beyond them and look back. And yeah, my word for the connection would have been explorer and curious. So that is somewhat closely tied to adventure.
Yeah.
Let's jump back into, since we're talking about constraints, and get you to start out by defining what a constraint is. Because most people view constraints as completely just limiting factors. So I want to hear how you look at them, how you lean into them, and see them as possible opportunities.
Yeah, so that's the core idea of the book, really, is that constraints have a bad rap. If constraints had a PR agency, we'd be firing them at this point, because I suppose it's the dictionary definition of a constraint. It's a limitation, and it's designed to in some way impede people. And through our work with challenger brands, so Adam, my co-author here, coined the phrase challenger brand in 1999 in his first book, Eating the Big Fish. And our work as a consultancy firm has always been with challengers, sometimes small businesses getting started, sometimes big businesses, but they're in a challenger position versus the big fish in their category. And so we've always been working in situations where the limitations are quite apparent. We don't have enough money, we don't have the know-how, we don't have the distribution, we don't have the technical chops. Whatever it is, there's some kind of way in which that team of people that we're working with has limitations. And we developed some expertise in trying to get them to see those limitations as opportunities. In a sense, it's kind of like it's endemic to the challenger position. You have to figure out a way to take these disadvantages and flip them into advantages. And so that's kind of the birth of the idea of the book, really. And as we started to do work with challengers, and I'll give you some instances in a moment of how this has worked, we started to understand that it's actually very common that there are all kinds of limitations out there that turn out to be the stimulus, the impetus for creating better solutions and more beautiful solutions, hence the title of the book, A Beautiful Constraint. And it seems to be, I'll give you a couple of stories that are my favorites from the book. The story of Dr. Seuss, for example, Theodore Geisel. It's the early 50s. His publisher comes to him and says, Theodore, most of the books that are on offer for young kids in America are bland and there's nothing interesting about them. We'd like you to write a book that first graders cannot put down. Great, he says. Imagine you got that brief as a children's book author, a book that first graders can't put down. Go. And then they call him and say, but here's the thing. We want you to write that book using just this list of words. There's 224 words, I think, on that list. And most of them were CVC words, which is consonant, vowel, consonant, because this is the birth of phonics in America. Just use that list of words. So he's got this beautiful, big ambition, write a best-selling book for first graders. But the constraint, he feels, is making his job impossible. And he almost quit. He almost did not write that book.
Wow.
Yeah. And eventually decided to embrace, it was the top two words on the list, apparently, cat and hat. He said, I'll just take that as the title. I'll see what I can do with it. And of course, just embracing that list of words gave birth to this form that, is now famous. And it's still, I think, the second best-selling children's book of all time, The Cat and the Hat. And so, there's stories like that. There's stories in the world of sport with the transformation of basketball and the NBA through the imposition of the limitation of time, the constraint of time, the 24-second shot clock. There's legions of stories in the world of business. Zappos is a great example where back in 1999, where they're going to build the first online shoe store, no one will lend them any money to build it because all the VCs are saying to them, you can't make an online shoe store. Don't you understand? People need to try on shoes. They need 3 or 4 different pairs, different sizes. They need to walk around the store. It's not going to work online. And so Zappos could have walked away from the idea, or they did what they did, which was to lean into that. How do we embrace the constraint and figure out what are the opportunities inherent in that? And so it led them to the 3 signature moments of what Zappos calls wow customer service. They've got 365-day return policy, so you can keep those shoes for a whole year if you're a real procrastinator before you have to decide. They'll ship unlimited amounts of shoes back and forth free of charge to your home, so you can get the 8.5, the 9, the 9.5 and see which fits, and they'll do 24-hour customer care. So it was the constraint they were dealing with that forced them to innovate and create something much better as a consequence. And we all know now the success of that business. So across all kinds of different fields of human endeavor, we started when we lifted our heads up from our own work and looked out at the world, we started to notice these stories and said, you know what, it turns out that it feels to us that constraints, limitations are really great stimulus for invention. And wouldn't it be great to understand how that happens, why that happens, what are the different common principles across all of these stories, that we could actually see if there's a methodology that we could codify and lay down so that people who don't believe that to be the case, that constraints can actually be beautiful, and that's the majority of us, can replicate that process and have the right mindset around constraints and have some simple tools and methods that they can use so that they can sort out their own constraints and figure out what the opportunities are lurking there.
There are 2 things you said. I want to backtrack in and get you to open up a little bit more if you can. When you're talking about branding, tell me what those constraints mean to a brand in terms of clarity to the company, and then bringing that clarity to buyers, and maybe especially as buyers are considering their relationship to a brand. And then the other is dig a little bit deeper into the value of knowing what you are not in terms of clarity.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about one of my favorite, and it's kind of it's not a very fashionable and cool story, but I think it's an amazing business. There's a company here in San Francisco called Xoom, Xoom, and they're in the electronics payment business, sending money overseas. So the story of and this is the kind of conversation that we had with Zoom. So just let me paint a picture. This is pre-IPO. Zoom